Hello friends, this is Dr. Rishi from the Learners Academy, and today we are going to talk about a very interesting mathematical concept. Have you ever wondered how we can divide things into parts smaller than one? So say suppose we have a pizza and we cut it into parts. If it's a small pizza, it would be cut into 4 parts. If a larger one, into 6, even a larger one, maybe into 8 equal parts. Which concept do we apply when we cut a pizza? You've guessed it correctly. We are talking about fractions. Fractions basically are parts of a whole thing. So whenever we consider to break something into smaller pieces, say a half of a mango or half of an apple or 1/4 of a pizza or 1/6 of a pizza. In all these examples, one concept that we are using is fractions. We are going to discuss what fractions are and what different type of fractions we study in standard 7th, 8th, 9th and 10th. So without any delay, let us talk about what fractions are. Let us take a very simple example. I take a square and I divide it into 2 equal parts. So if I paint one part of these equal parts, then I can call it as a half of the square. Same way, if I have a circle and I divide it into 3 equal parts and I shade one of them, I can say that it is 1/3 of the circle. If the same circle is there and I divide it into 3 equal parts, however, this time I color 2 of these parts. Then I can say it is 2/3 of the circle or 2/3 of the circle. So if I have whole of something and I break it into parts, what I would be getting is fraction of the whole that I had. So anything that can be written as P upon Q, where Q is not equal to 0, can be considered a fraction. So we have defined the fraction as P upon Q. Here P is called as the numerator and Q is called as the denominator. And effectively what this fraction means is P divides Q. So if P divides Q and the division does not complete, meaning it doesn't give us quotient, remainder, then we can write it in the form of a fraction. Now, what can these P and Q be? So these P and Q need to be an integer. What are integers? These are numbers that are negative as well as positive. So P and Q can be negative, can be positive. P can be 0, however Q can't be 0. Because if you take any number and you divide it by 0, the final answer would not be defined mathematically. We have seen what fractions are pictorially, we have also seen what fractions are mathematically. So let us talk about what different type of fractions we study. Fractions basically can be divided into 2 parts: proper fractions and improper fractions. The definition is quite simple. So in a fraction, if the numerator is larger than the denominator, then we will call it as a improper fraction. And if the numerator is smaller than the denominator, then we will call it as a proper fraction. If P is larger than Q, then it would be called as a improper fraction. And if Q is larger than P, then it would be called as a proper fraction. This is how we separate fractions depending on the relation between P and Q. Now, if we have an improper fraction, then improper fraction can further be put into mixed fractions. A mixed fraction would have a whole number part and a fraction part. Let us understand mixed fraction using an example. Suppose I take a very easy example, 3 by 2. As you can see, the numerator is greater than the denominator. So, it is an improper fraction. So, this improper fraction can be put in the form of a mixed fraction. If I do this division, 3 divided by 2, I would get 2 ones are 2 and my remainder would be 1. So whatever I get as my quotient, I would write as my whole number, and whatever is my remainder would become the numerator of my mixed fraction, and the denominator would remain the same. Now let us convert a mixed fraction into an improper fraction. If this is my mixed fraction, then to convert it into an improper fraction, I would first multiply this 2 by the denominator. So I would have it as 2 multiplied by 4 plus 1, and the denominator would remain as it is, giving me the final answer as 9/4. So this was about mixed fractions. Now let us go and practice about mixed fractions. Now let us practice some more mixed fractions. I would give the questions on the board. You can write them down and write the answers in the comment box. These are the 4 examples to convert from improper fractions to mixed fractions. Quickly make a note of them and write your answers in the comment box. These are the examples where you can convert the mixed fractions into improper fractions, and write your answers in the comment box. Now let us consider the next type of fractions that we have. This type of fraction is a subtype of proper fractions. This is called as unit fractions. In unit fractions, the numerators are always 1. So any fraction that is written as 1/3, 1/4, 1/7, 1/19 can be considered as a unit fraction. So whenever someone asks you what a unit fraction is, first thing that should strike you is the word unit, which means 1. So in unit fraction, the numerators are always going to be 1. Fractions can also be differentiated by considering their denominators. If two fractions have same denominator in their simplest form, then they would be called as like fractions. However, if they have different denominators, then we will call them as unlike fractions. So let us talk about like fractions. And unlike fractions. As I have discussed before this, like fractions would have same denominators. Unlike fractions would have different denominators. Now when I say same denominators and different denominators, I am considering the fractions to be in their simplest form. What do I mean by fractions in their simplest form? Let us have a brief review about it. So if I take a fraction, say 3 upon 6, then this fraction won't be considered as in its simplest form, because I can divide both the numerator and the denominator by 3. So the simplest form of this fraction would be 1 by 2, because if I divide 3 by 3, I get 1, and 6 by 3, I get 1. So whenever I talk about fractions, I have to consider them in their simplest form. What do I mean by simplest form? Is they should have nothing common between the numerator and the denominator. Now let's go ahead and talk about like fractions and unlike fractions again. So if I consider two fractions and I consider them in their simplest form and their denominators are same, they would be called as like fractions. And if their denominator is different, they would be called as unlike fractions. So 1 upon 3 and 5 upon 3 will be considered as like fractions because their denominators are same. On the contrary, 1 upon 5 and 1 upon 3 will not be considered as like fractions. They would be called unlike fractions. Now two fractions can be added only if they are like fractions. That is, their denominators are same. We would be seeing the addition of fractions in the next video, where we discuss all the 4 operations, that is addition, multiplication, subtraction and division of fractions. You will need this information for that video. So again, to reiterate it, this is very important that the fractions need to be like fractions if you have to add them or subtract them. And when I say like fractions, I mean their denominators are going to be same. Now we come to the last type of fractions, and they are equivalent fractions. So two fractions, if their simplest form is equal, then we will call them as equivalent fractions. Let us see it with an example. Though their denominators are different, if we convert them into their simplest form, the simplest form would always be same. So 3 upon 6, I can divide the numerator and the denominator by 3 and get the answer as 1 upon 2. In the second case, I can divide the numerator and the denominator by 2 and get my answer as 1 by 2. So these two would be considered as equivalent fractions. That was all about fractions from my end. Also, in case you find some topics in mathematics difficult, please let us know in the comment box. We will try to make sure that those topics are covered in our videos so that you can be helped out. This was Dr. Rishi from the Learners Academy. Please click the subscribe button and the notification bell to get our notifications whenever we upload new videos. Thank you.